First is just something I think everybody knows. It's around the community. I think our community has embraced the concept of local first. What does that mean? Supporting whether it's local beer, local distillation, local restaurants, local foods, local. But I want to just give a little bit of background information on Elissa, the person also. She moved here. She was in Battle Creek area, went to school at Aquinas, and we kept her. She was flirting with maybe going into law or doing some other things. Thankfully, she got hooked into Local First and has been here. Has a neat background, but she has been the president of Local First since 2007. Almost 1,000 businesses are involved in this effort, encouraging sustainable business development. She's been Grand Rapids Young Nonprofit Professionals Exemplary Executive in 2010, B Corp Measure What Matters Champion in 2014, and 3 times has been named one of the Grand Rapids Business Journal's top 40 under 40. Is Warren staying here?
No, he's not here.
Oh, there he is. So we all know who gets that taken care of. So congratulations on that. Local First impacts us in a lot of different ways. I'm pleased to welcome Elissa so we can learn more about this great organization. Welcome, Elissa.
All right. Thank you for having me here today. I'm honored to be here. I was thinking as I was driving over, I need to call my grandfather after this. He was a Rotarian in the Gull Lake area for about 35 years. So he would be very excited to hear that I was here with all of you. So just by a show of hands, I know there's a lot of familiar faces in the audience, but how many of you have heard of Local First before? Awesome, awesome. That's what I like to see. So before I talk more about the work that we do in the community and why it matters here locally, I want to give some big picture context, because I think it's important that we ground this in a conversation about what's happening in our world right now. And so I just want to share 3 slides with you that are all things that have happened in the last couple of years that have really stuck with me, and I see traces of them back to Local First. And as I say that, I guess I also want to add that the Local First here, the organization doing work here, was one of the first like it in the country. There are now over 150 in the United States, and there are others that are starting up in other countries too. So while we think about local in this place, and we're going to talk about what it means here, it matters in a much bigger context as well. So I don't know how many of you saw this photo that came out about a year and a half ago. These are baby bottles with water from both Flint and Detroit, right? This was right after the contamination news came out in Flint. And when I think about some of the decisions or some of the things that are happening like this in our world, I think part of the story behind the scenes of how we would have water that was essentially basically poison in Flint is that the people who were experiencing the effects of the decisions that led to that were not necessarily the people making the decisions. And there were a lot of other people and other systems in the way. So we're at a time in our world where sometimes we're disconnected from the consequences of our choices, right? I can throw my trash out, it just automatically goes away. I don't have to ever think about where it goes, I don't have to see it again. That's just one example, but I think we've got a lot of disconnection in our world. We've built these complex global systems. Some of them are economic. So I don't know how many of you saw this movie, The Big Short, but it did a really great job, I thought, of explaining the financial crash and what happened. And basically we built, not intentionally, I would say, for many people not intentionally, we built systems that were too complex for humans to fully understand the consequences of, where we couldn't see the effects of our actions. We couldn't see how systems were impacting each other. And so people who thought they were making good decisions maybe couldn't know that they weren't because they couldn't see the consequences. A couple years ago, I was invited to go talk about Local First's work on the entire other side of the world, in Guam, actually. And my husband and I flew through Japan and spent some time in Japan on our way back from Guam. And when we were there right around Thanksgiving. And in Japan, they don't celebrate Thanksgiving in Japan, and they don't celebrate Christmas, but they do celebrate Black Friday. And so this is a picture of an ad at the Gap in Japan, so an American company, but a global company in Japan, where this culture of commercialization has really, and the way that we buy and spend money has spread globally, even though none of the holidays that are directly affiliated with how Black Friday would have come about here exist there. And so we live in this global world, and also in a world where, so I love to travel. I really loved the flags that you were showing because I love to travel. It's one of my greatest pleasures in life. And when I'm in a place like Japan, I want to experience the culture. I want the food. I want to see if I can find clothing that's made in that place. I want all those most local firsty things. I want to experience the place for what it is. And so it was sad to me, actually, to see that they have the Gap in Japan. And there are lots of other businesses like that as well. So when I think about some of those big systems things that are happening, a lot of the forces that are at play, I think a lot about how can we calibrate our lives at a human scale? How can we think about what are ways we can build connection in our own lives? What are ways that we can protect and grow and develop unique cultures and systems? What are ways we can create systems where there's enough, I don't know if I want to use the word transparency, but I can see more of my effects, and my organization can see its effects, and companies can see their effects on the community around them. And so how can we build those systems at a human scale? And that's really what I see Local First doing. So Local First mission is to lead the development of an economy that's grounded in local ownership, that meets the basic needs of people, builds local wealth and social capital, functions in harmony with our ecosystem, and encourages joyful community life. And we do that in partnership now with over 900 locally owned businesses, privately held companies throughout the Western Michigan region. And I want to talk a little bit about why local matters, why investment in local companies is critical to the health of our economy, but then also tie it back to some of those things that are happening globally and dive a little deeper into our work. So for the sake of this presentation, when I talk about local, I'm talking about companies that are locally owned, so the owner lives here. And that's important to us for a number of reasons. One is that at the end of the day, the decision maker resides in our community. And we think that's important because most likely that person's kids are going to be going to school here, they'll be involved in the church here, they'll be swimming in the lake here, and you're not going to dump toxins in a lake where you want to swim. You know, you're going to take care of a school system that's educating your children and your family members, all of those things. And so when we're working at a local level, there's actually this like beautiful messiness to life that happens when we can see the consequences of our decisions. And that for people happens at a really human scale. So that local ownership matters to us. We're also working with privately held companies. So once again, the decision makers reside here, and those businesses are headquartered in the community. So at a very base level, local matters for economic reasons. This is a pie chart that shows, well, I want to tell a story about it. So when Local First came about, it came about because this information was brand new. And basically what had happened is there was a study that was done in Andersonville in Chicago. I don't know if you've been in Andersonville. It's a pretty cool neighborhood in Chicago. It's about a 1 mile stretch long. And in about 2000, the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Corporation in Andersonville had provided the first incentives for a big box store to move into Andersonville. It was a big box bookstore. And they had done so because they thought it would help attract more people to the neighborhood. For many years, Andersonville had been a really thriving commercial district. A lot of the businesses were locally owned, they were family owned. It was the kind of place where people would come from all over the city of Chicago to maybe have brunch on a Saturday morning and go to the favorite Swedish bakery and the special bookstores and the little clothing stores and then, go home. But when this bookstore came in, when this first big box came in, the community had thought it would be really great. And instead, what they started to see is that a lot of those local businesses surrounding it were priced out, rental rates started to increase, and those businesses moved to other parts of the community. People stopped coming to the neighborhood quite as much, And so basically, those developers stepped back and said, whoa, 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 what just happened? We thought that this investment would be really good for our community, and instead it's having the direct opposite effects that we thought it would. And so they commissioned the first economic impact study of locally owned businesses that was done in the country. And it traced how $100 moved through different types of companies. So it looked, for example, at a locally owned sub shop in Andersonville versus the chain or franchise, the local bookstore versus the big box bookstore. And what they found is that for every $100 spent, 73% more money stayed in the community when it was spent at locally owned businesses. So if you look at this pie chart on the left, this is the amount that's spent at local. The one on the on your right is the non-local, and the yellowish orange is what stays, and the red is what goes. And this happens for a lot of reasons. Part of it is that if you're a local restaurant, for example, like a Marika Treves, you're more likely to work with other local businesses, so local farms, local marketing companies, local legal companies. Those services aren't centralized out at headquarters somewhere else across the country. You're actually making those decisions in your community. And so that money stays and it recirculates between people and between hands. Does this make sense? Okay. And then the red is what goes. So 73% more money stays in the community when you're supporting a local business. This is almost a decade ago now. So when I first started at Local First, we would take that pie chart information around town and talk to people about how it mattered if you spent your money locally and how money would stay and recirculate. But one of the areas of pushback we got was to say, well, that's in Andersonville, it's in Chicago, we're not like Chicago, we're Grand Rapids, we're more typical American City, we're bigger than this neighborhood, we're smaller than Chicago, is that true here? And so we hired a firm called Civic Economics, and they actually replicated that same exact study here in Kent County back in 2008 and found that the results were the same. So 73% more money stays in the community when you support local. But we did that study in 2008, and in 2008, the recession had already hit, right? And so we really wanted to know at that time, we asked the researchers, okay, if more money stays, can you help us project what could happen if we as a community could make a shift towards more local purchasing? And I think that part of this thriving city that we live in is because our community has made that shift today. What they told us back in 2008 is that if we could shift $1 in $10 we were currently spending in Kent County to local businesses, so not spending more money, just shifting and spending that money at local versus non-local, that would create $140 million in new economic impact. It would create 1,600 jobs and about $55 million in new wages for those workers. And so when I drive around Grand Rapids now, and I see all of our breweries and all of our restaurants serving local food and all of our just all of the localness that's happening, that was not happening when this was done. That's happening now in part because we as a community have chosen to go there and to make that shift. And I really believe we're thriving right now because of it. Another reason we ask people to support local businesses is because they really create a unique place, right? They create a sense of place and prosperity. So many of you probably recognize this is Yesterdog, right? Yesterdog is a great example of a local business that is sometimes people think businesses have to be expensive to be local, or that local means expensive. It doesn't. So I like to pull out this slide because I think Yesterdog is one of those unique businesses that we're fortunate to have in our community, right? Where you can go on a Saturday and you'll see a whole family there with kids eating lunch. You can go there late at night. There's a totally different post-bar crowd, right? But it's a place where people have been going and scratching their name into the walls and just really like claiming that as our community space. It's also a space that hosts a lot of political candidates when they come through town. It hosts community conversations. And uniquely, it is a business that pays a living wage to all its workers, which most people, I would say, would not guess that a hot dog shop would pay. So it proves that there's a connection between local ownership and taking care of your people too. We also talk to people about supporting local businesses because I believe they provide better customer service. So this is one of my favorite businesses. This is Gazelle Sports. I've been a runner for years and years, and Gazelle is one of those businesses where if they fit you for a pair of running shoes and you get blisters, you can take them back and they will exchange them, no questions asked, for another pair. That's customer service. They're also a great example of a local business that's a social enterprise or a B Corp, and I'll talk more about what that means in a minute. But they've spun 6 nonprofits out of this for-profit company, things like Girls on the Run and other initiatives that really advance the owner's mission and purpose, which is to make West Michigan the healthiest place on the planet. That's not the kind of thing you would hear from an online company or a big box company. It's something special and unique because those owners live here in the community, and so they want this to be the healthiest place. Local is also important because as a consumer, it increases, it gives us more choice, quite frankly, right? So this is just a small example of the number of breweries we have in our community right now. I remember when Bell's was the only brewery really in the state of Michigan, but now we've got so many options. And these are businesses that are generating income here in our community. It's recirculating. They're also creating a district. The tourism industry related to brewing here has expanded drastically, and part of that is all of these local businesses individually working together and succeeding, but making this a place that others would want to come to sample their product. It's different than if there was just one brewery here and they were the dominant one, right? It's a lot more fun to come and be able to hop between all those places for a long weekend. Local businesses also invest in the community in unique ways. And I know many of you know this because you're all in business, right? But I just want to share these points with you to talk a little bit about why this matters. So this is an example of, this was Atomic Objects' old office. They've now just moved across the street. I need to update my slide with a picture of the new one. But Atomic Object is a software company. They're a thriving company. And they were founded by a couple that lived in East Grand Rapids, and they would walk down Wealthy Street just about 10 years ago when a lot of people avoided Wealthy Street intentionally. They didn't necessarily want to drive down Wealthy or spend time there. And this couple would walk their dog down Wealthy, and when they decided that they were going to purchase a building to be the home for their burgeoning software company, they made a choice to invest in a part of the community that at that time was really being overlooked. And they were one of a number of owners that chose to do that. But they located in that community, they grew jobs along that street, they invested in other businesses that opened along that community and are working in the neighborhoods, both north and south of that street, to figure out how they can more deeply engage. That's a unique kind of investment. That area, if you were across the country, you wouldn't have invested on Wealthy Street at that time. You would only invest there because you were uniquely from the place. One of the things that I think is most interesting is that there's actually a study from Oxford University that came out a couple years ago that shows that communities with higher proportions of local ownership are better off by any number of health standards. So they have lower rates of obesity, lower rates of diabetes, higher rates of high school graduation, higher rates of literacy, and the researchers dug deep into, well, how could that be? Why could that be? Who's been in a conversation in Grand Rapids where we've talked about collaboration? And you've heard that this community is really good at collaborating, right? They happen all the time. Part of the reason this community is really good at collaborating is because we have one of the largest clusters of family-owned businesses in the entire world. So when there's a study that comes out that shows that communities with higher proportions of local ownership are better off by all these standards, we can see some of that here in our community. The researchers attributed those health factors to 2 reasons. One, the ability of there to be multiple owners in a community and more diversified wealth. So wealth to be in multiple hands. And then the ability for those owners to collaborate and volunteer or sit on boards or give philanthropically in different ways to causes they care about. Whether that be about schools, whether that be about health, whether that be about something like Talent 2025, right? Starting to think about talent attraction and retention in our region. You can do that in a community where you have diversified wealth and diversified financial and social capital in a really unique way. And you can also be nimble and address community needs in a really unique way. I want to make another point about this though before we move on. Grand Rapids is really wonderful for many, many people who live here. We win award after award. But we also know that I don't know how many of you saw it, but there was a study in Forbes that came out last year that showed that Grand Rapids was the second to last city in the United States in terms of best place to open a business if you're a Black entrepreneur. So essentially the second to worst place to be a Black entrepreneur. That means, so when we look around our community and we see needs, trace it back to the proportion of ownership within the community. Look at, if we know that communities that have higher proportions of local ownership are better off by all kinds of state standards, look for where there's a lack of ownership, and if we really want to address some of the systemic issues in our community, we need to create opportunities for ownership for those parts of the population where it's not represented. Does that make sense? Okay, I'll talk more about that. So just a real flyover on some of our programming. That's an old one. I have new directories for you in the back, so if you're interested in shifting your spending towards local or finding out the kinds of companies we work with or more about us, there's a whole bunch of these on the table right where we came in. And this is a resource for you. It's tips on how to live locally and a list of a bunch of businesses. You can also check out our website, localfirst.com. Throughout the year, we pull business owners and other folks from the community together to build relationships, to build those human skill relationships, to shift purchasing and to learn from each other. So these are some examples of that. We also work really consciously to build supply and demand. So the eat local stuff that we're seeing that I mentioned, like that uptick in breweries, that uptick in restaurants that are serving local food. 10 years ago, when we got the results of that economic impact study back, we started to think, well, how can we encourage people to make that shift towards local? Well, everybody eats, and agriculture is our largest sector. So let's see if we can start to challenge people to eat local. And so we started a consumer-driven Eat Local campaign. And when people start to ask businesses for local food or where their food's coming from, businesses respond. And so it creates that opportunity to support more local farmers and more local businesses. So we do programming like that. These are pictures of my favorite event that we host each year. If any of you are around at the end of October, it's called Fork Fest. And it takes place at Romans Gardens. We have about 50 different food businesses that come out, different bakeries and breweries and restaurateurs and farmers and butchers and all sorts of things. And you can buy a ticket and sample food from all these local businesses and learn about what's available in the community. They also get to know each other there and start to source from each other. In the beginning of June, so June 3rd, 2 weeks from now, we have our Local First Street Party. It's the 14th annual, and we're expecting about 15,000 people to come down outside of Bistro Bella Vita. This is an opportunity really to learn about local businesses in the community and to celebrate local music and local art and to drink some great local beer and eat local food. It's the same weekend as Festival of the Arts. So if you're down for that event, make sure you stop over. Our beer tent opens at 3. It's pretty important, right? This year, we just launched a campaign called Good for Grand Rapids, and this is in partnership with the City of Grand Rapids and many others. And this is all about helping businesses improve their impact on the community. And so it's not just for Local First member businesses, it's for all companies. You don't have to be privately held, you don't have to be locally owned, but it's about encouraging companies to start to measure their impact on the community. And we have a free assessment tool that we've created in partnership with a national organization called B-Lab. And we'll be recognizing companies who simply take the effort to measure. They don't have to excel, but they have to measure. And then we're helping businesses move along that pipeline and be better employers and better community stewards. We also do programming to help grow the conversation about B Corp. And I'm just gonna fly because I know I'm almost up in time. But B Corps are companies that are third-party certified for being good for their community and good for their workers. And so if you've heard of LEED certification or fair trade certification, this is the same kind of thing, but it's more holistic. It looks at all of a business's practices. And we're up to 17 certified B Corps here in West Michigan, although I think we've got dozens and dozens more companies that could follow this path. It's also, this is a conversation that's growing globally. So there are people right now, even in some of the companies that are listed here, who I've talked to who have hired new employees who found them because they're a B Corp. Because on the coasts, there's more awareness of that brand and what it means than there even is in the state of Michigan yet. And so folks who are wanting to find a job where they're making a meaningful impact while doing their work are starting to look for this. I just want to close with local first really means people first. We're really about supporting people here in the community, helping them connect to each other and support each other, and then helping our businesses that are all owned by and staffed by people work together to create a community that works for everyone in our region. If you have any questions, that's me, and I'm happy to take them now.
Why do you wait until 3 o'clock to open your beer tank?
We might have to readjust that next year.
Seriously, I've wondered this for years. Why does it make sense, not the beer tent I have, why does it make sense to source from local farms? I get the rest of this, but some farm out in Coopersville, why is that better that they sell to us than they sell to a restaurant in Chicago?
So it's not necessarily better for the farm if they sell to us than to a restaurant in Chicago, but what happens if they sell to us is it keeps the money here longer. It tightens that circle a little bit. There's also potentially less of an environmental impact if that food that's being produced is just being trucked into Grand Rapids than over to Chicago or over further across the country. But I just want to clarify, we're about local first, but we also love companies that are locally owned, privately held, and that are importing cash back into our community. So like founders selling across the country means more money comes back into our community. That's great. I would love for there to be more opportunities down the road. As we think about economic development, we look at it with a lens of, okay, so if we have more breweries that are selling things here, can we have more farms that are growing hops here that are selling to those breweries? Because then that money stays here, because otherwise a lot of those hops are being brought from across the country right now. So we're all about building that system that keeps money spinning here in West Michigan longer and thinking about, economists call it import substitution. So it's more about that farm selling here versus us bringing something in from the outside. Yes?
You're seeing a lot of local businesses close, like MC and some others. How do these companies deal with like this giant called Amazon?
I'm so glad you asked about Amazon. So Amazon is this quiet giant, actually, that's tremendously disrupting the way people are buying things. So 55% of American households are now Amazon Prime members. And last year, 60% of all online purchases happened through Amazon. So people didn't even go to Google and type in, I want to buy this thing. They like literally went to Amazon and typed in, I want to buy this thing. So what's happening right now is basically we have a very large online retail giant that's shifting the whole system. And so I would predict that the trends going forward are online shopping and then back to local shopping, because even as I say shop local first, this is not a new thing. This is the way we used to always do it before we created malls and other big box stores and things. And so what I see as I read the news right now and watch a lot of the retailers that are closing in our community, the middle is falling out. It's like anything that would be the more generic big box experience that doesn't have that customer service of the local, doesn't have the uniqueness of the local, is not, like that's falling out, because otherwise you can order it online. Yeah. Also though, like keep in mind, support what you want over here. Like support the local retail over here, because this giant that is Amazon is not gonna go away, and they're just gonna get bigger. Yeah.
So is there an online tool where we can go, hey, you know what, I want this delivered within 2 days and from a local business?
So, no, unfortunately, right now, there's not an online tool that allows local businesses to compete with the delivery and shipping times that Amazon has, or even within
to
2
pick
days.
up, you know, even to pick up from that business, hey, I'll swing by on the way home,
So one thing that I do, there's not like a generic tool that I can give you, but I can tell you one thing that I do pretty frequently. I think we can expect a lot more from our local stores than we're used to, because we're not, like, I grew up in an age of being told we go to the mall to buy all our stuff, right? Like, that's where I grew up doing a lot of shopping, and I've shifted all of that over the years. But it is not infrequent for me to call a local business and say, hey, I actually just did this the other day. I needed to get a gift, and I just picked up the phone and called Art of the Table and said, I need a gift. It needs to be about this price point. I think this person likes these things. This is who it's for. You might even know them better than I do. Can you just put it together and I'll pick it up on my way home? And they did, and it was all pre-wrapped, and it was like perfectly, and they actually knew the person I was buying it for, so they were able to put their favorite wine in versus what I had told them to do, right? So there's that kind of experience. I do that with local bookstores too, with Schuler's or with Books and Mortar all the time. Instead of buying books online, I call them and say, hey, can you get this in for me? And then they call right away when it's in. So there's lots of things that we can do like that are creative, but it is a little bit more creative, and it's not quite as easy as the one click on Amazon.
One last question.
Of the 1,600 jobs that are created from the 10% redirection in sales towards local, how many, like, do the big businesses, how many jobs are displaced from the redirection of sales?
I can't tell you off the top of my head the percentage that would be displaced from big businesses if you're shifting, or from non-local businesses if you're shifting spending towards local. Certainly some of that would happen, but we actually have a lot of data that shows that more often than not, what usually happens is that we as a community, not just us, this happens all over the United States and all over the world, but that will incentivize a big box store to move in, like say a big box hunting or fishing store, and it will create a certain number of jobs, but we discount the number of jobs that we lose as all of those little mom and pop hunting and fishing stores that had existed for a long time go away, and they usually do go away. So I can tell you on average there's a net win in job creation if you shift to local versus not, but I don't know directly from that study. Thank you. I forgot you told
No,
me
don't
to do
leave.
that.
Don't leave. Thank you very much. I think we probably can keep going with questions, just in case you happen to be here for a few more minutes afterwards, maybe ask some more questions. But in honor of the time that you have just spent with us here and educating us a little bit more, we would like to present the certificate to you for a clean water filter that's going to be given to a needy family in Nicaragua in your name. So thank you for that.
Thank
and
you.
To go inside there, we have an application for the Rotary Club, which although we have global reach, we are a local first.
Yeah. I'll take it.
And if I may, have John take that, I'm going to steal you out here and see if you'll take a picture with us. Right over here. Hold on a little bit of seat, but not a lot. Yeah, in honor of local first, everybody just like put number one up.
We're good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you again.